Hello and welcome to our very first Alabama recruiting show here on AL.com. I'm Nick Alvarez, a recruiting reporter for AL.com. Behind the scenes, we have the great Patrick Greenfield as our sports video and social media producer. It's an exciting time. Kickoff is a few days away down here in Alabama. We had week 0 last week. And, like every year, a lot of attention is being paid to the future of Alabama football. In this case, that means recruits. And in Alabama's case, that means a lot of 5-star and 4-star high quality recruits. This week, we're going to look at kind of an overview of the class, and then kind of on a week-by-week basis, we're going to kind of look at, a specific area of Nick Saban's group, whether it be the offensive linemen that they've put together so far, the defensive backs, the 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs. There's a lot of exciting things about this class, and we kind of want to dive in and answer any questions you guys may have. I want to thank Inline Lighting for sponsoring the show, and it's going to be great. We want to answer your questions here. We want to know any concerns you may have about the class. There was a few a couple months ago when the numbers weren't there, and what's next. It's a really exciting time in recruiting with NIL, with the sponsorship, the scholarship cap being lifted in football. There's a lot of areas for growth here in Alabama's class, and here at AL.com, we're going to take you through it as the year goes on. So to kind of start, I just kind of wanted to look at the class overall. Alabama currently has the number 1 class per 24/7 Sports consensus rankings. They have 21 recruits. That breaks down to fairly even, 8 on offense, 12 defensive, and 1 specialist. You look at the board here, it's hard not to immediately kind of get your eye caught up by the 5 offensive linemen that new coach Eric Wolford has brought in. He comes in from Kentucky, a place where he had high expectations, to Tuscaloosa with even more expectations, and he's kind of immediately hit the ground running with bringing in 5 commits, maybe even more. When you look at those guys, they all have kind of similar big bodies, not shocking for linemen, but they also all have high athletic upside. You look at the 2 quarterbacks, which, everyone thought Arch Manning would be in the conversation. He ends up at Texas. Alabama still gets 2 top 10 guys, and Dylan Lonergan and Eli Holstein, 2 guys who kind of fit the mold of the thrower and kind of athlete Alabama's looked at that position for the last few years. I think the most impressive recruits they pulled in on the offensive side of the ball is right there at that running back position with 2 of the best in the nation, with Georgia's number 1 recruit, Justice Haynes, and Florida's top running back recruit, Richard Young. When you look at the receiver group, Cole Adams and Malik Benson, there's opportunity there. Malik Benson currently is playing as the number 1 JUCO player in the country, and Ty Lockwood was one of the flips on this class from Ohio State. It's really exciting when you kind of look at the areas of need on offense. You think quarterback and running back are pretty much done. You can always add some more receivers. So Bama's looked at the transfer portal for that in years past. And at tight end, you can obviously see them picking up another one, because this time last year, I don't believe they think they had 1 or 2, and they ended up finishing the 2022 class with about 3 or 4. So offensively, Alabama's class kind of built a little slower, but once they got Dylan, Eli, Justice, and Richard, and especially with all those linemen, I think it came together quite well so far. Jumping over to the defensive side of the ball, it's a little bit different. You kind of see some of the emphasis on those skill possessions. Alabama's 4 5-stars, 3 of them play defensive back, with Jaleel Hurley from Florence, Tony Mitchell from Thompson, and Georgia's Caleb Downs, who we'll get into a little bit later in the show. The defensive line is probably where you kind of going to want the most moving forward, especially at that linebacker position. Justin Jefferson, another JUCO player, I believe he's number 2 in the country right now overall, behind Malik Benson. On the defensive side, there's a lot of conversation that's been had about the in-state players Alabama's missed on in Thompson's Peter Woods and Gardendale's Kelby Collins. But you get Pierre from Eufaula and Osborne from Hewitt-Trussville. You kind of have some players with upside that you'll probably see finish within the top 75 players in the country by the time their senior years are finished up. And Brayson Hubbard, he's probably one of the more fun films to watch in this class, just because he is a pretty talented quarterback for high school football, and he's coming to Alabama next year as a safety or as a defensive back, as they think, kind of the athleticism can carry over. So I think now we kind of want to look at, we're going to try to highlight 1 player a week or 1 position group a week. And this week, we're going to look at 5-star Caleb Downs. I think we have his highlights here. And when you watch Caleb Downs, what's kind of exciting about him is I mentioned Alabama's offensive line recruits all kind of have kind of similar, I think, builds and play styles. On the defensive side of the ball, defensive with the secondary, I think they all do something a little bit different. Tony Mitchell can probably project as kind of being down as that star position for Alabama. Joe Hurley's known across the state for his amazing cover corner skills. Caleb Downs is kind of that prototypical safety who can do a little bit of everything. He finds the ball, whether it be getting in the mix, getting an interception, or tipping a pass. Offensively, he's also been a star for Mill Creek. And then everyone you talk to about this kid, it just seems that that makes sense why he's going to Alabama. He's a hard worker. You see there, he's a National Honor Society member. On an ESPN nationally televised game for Mill Creek, he set the school's interception record, which I believe on this one right here. He's an instinctive player who I like him kind of throwing up the peace sign there, and he kind of can make a mark in a few different ways. And when you kind of look at Alabama's secondary group, last year they bring in Kool-Aid McKinstry from Pinson Valley, and he makes an immediate impact. And you even see some freshman starters on this year's team. So when you're kind of looking at the group that they have coming in, Caleb Downs is someone who you probably want to see get a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit stronger, but he has the speed, kind of has the ball skills, kind of everything you want on a day one player coming in. Now, one thing I kind of noted here, right now, so Mill Creek is currently 2-0, playing a national schedule, and Caleb leads the team in touchdowns, tackles, and interceptions. He is an absolute star, and you're going to be hearing a lot about him as one of the best players in the country. I believe he's ranked 13th right now, and he's going to be a guy that from the moment he steps on campus, people are going to be expecting a lot from because he has such a strong track record. And now I guess so. Usually we're going to want some questions from you guys in the chat or fed them throughout the week. Feel free to email us me at NAlvarez@AL.com. You reach out to us on Twitter, leave a comment on the YouTube video below. And this week we kind of have some general questions as we kind of break down the class overall and to look into some things. So one question I kind of wanted to start out with is how big can this class get? They're currently at 21. This past May, the NCAA did away with the scholarship cap that was previously at 25 players you could bring in. You already kind of saw a little bit with UConn. They brought in 40 new scholarship players as they beat Alabama's week one opponent, Utah State. So the last couple of years, Alabama's brought in around 25 recruits. So they've always pretty much hit that number. This year, they're already at 21, and there's already 4 kids, I think, that have been linked to Alabama, whether it be current Ole Miss commits and Terry Perkins, some of the Carver Montgomery defensive linemen or defensive edge rushers. So I think it's pretty safe to say that they're going to blow past that 21 number pretty easily. Now, how big is it going to get? I don't know. You could see another offensive lineman coming into the group. You could see maybe one of them transferring away if that class gets too big as well. Maybe another tight end. I think where you're really going to see the numbers grow are kind of at that wide receiver position and on the defensive line as Alabama, looks to fill that eventually huge-sized Will Anderson hole in the defense next year. And obviously that won't be done with one player, but you want to have as many chances, kind of many bites at the apple as you want in that scenario. So one of the other things that we wanted to look at here was what's needed in this Alabama class, what's currently missing. And off the top, not much. Offensively, Wolford was brought in to kind of not just rebuild kind of the current offensive lineman they had, but kind of create a new standard. And I think they've done that. At running back, they got 2 players last year, so you'd think they'd be done there. At quarterback, I think the only question is, do both of those quarterbacks stay come next fall, or does the room get a little tight? So I think on the offensive side, you're really kind of looking at wide receiver targets. There's always going to be flip candidates, which I guess you can kind of say the same thing about Alabama's players. But I think when you're really looking at what Alabama needs, I think you're looking at 2 positions, defensive lineman and linebacker. Losing Peter Woods and Kelby Collins to Clemson and Florida respectively didn't necessarily sound the alarms for a lot of people inside the building, but you wouldn't know that if you looked on Twitter. Overall, though, I think that you kind of want a few more chances. You kind of want a few more maybe proven things as opposed to the upside that Pierre and Osborne have shown so far this year. And in the secondary, Alabama is always looking for talent back there. It's Nick Saban's calling card. You know, Grayson Hubbard came out of nowhere, and he's in the he's changing positions. You wouldn't be surprised if there are a few more other players who do that. Also in the JUCO circuit, Alabama's always looking. They found Malik Benson, and while they were there recruiting Malik Benson, they got Miles Kitselman, who is one of their tight ends in the 2022 class. So there's, I think, a lot of room for growth. But overall, I think if you're kind of looking at this class big picture, you just kind of have to commend the work that they've all done, whether it be Travaris Robinson, whether it be Wolford, will it be Holman Wiggins. There's whether it be Bill O'Brien, even with the quarterbacks, who said that was a huge step in part for them to get to work with someone with NFL experience. It's the recruiting basis of Alabama is as strong as it has been. And I think when you see that 25 cap number get lifted, whoever is going to come forward is just going to kind of continue to add to that. And I guess to give us some two names to watch as we wrap it up here, I originally spent some time with the Montgomery Advertiser when I first moved down to Alabama from the Northeast. So I am just kind of enamored with James Smith and Quay Rousseau, two of the top players in the country. There's some Auburn targets too, national commitments, and I'd be hard pressed to not think that one of them will end up with the Crimson Tide. So those are some fun names to watch. Enjoy the games this weekend, and be sure to send us your questions, send us your feedback, and as always, thanks for checking us out.